Hey friends, welcome back to another awesome video. So this was our before, and I'll kind of show you our after, and we'll go into everything that we did. So my client, she has had a very stressful year and her hair has really gone through it. Her hair is super thin and it's very, very thin. Like you can see her scalp very easily. So I'm gonna show you how we took her hair from this to looking like this, with just, color and a lot of keratin bonds just for adding some length, but mostly a lot of fullness just to give her the hair that she's always wanted. So this honestly was so fun. It did take about, like 5 hours to do. So it was a lot of work, but my assistant was awesome. So first off, we started with her color. I use Kenra 5 NUA in their demi-permanent line. I did use their permanent developer just because she does have some grays. I kind of wanted to blur those out. Plus we were kind of getting rid of some of her highlights that she has in there because she really wants to feel very brunette with just like some soft dimension. So I want to make sure that this isn't going to be something that's going to fade in like the next couple weeks. So I love this color. Then I just mix it equal parts with the 10 volume. That way it's going to give her a little bit more coverage. Then we're going to go through and we are going to mix up some lightener. We are using our classic cocktail of Blonde Me by Schwarzkopf and Free Lights by Wella. I like to mix the two simply because the Wella Free Lights is a clay-based lightener and the Schwarzkopf Blonde Me is just a normal lightener. So when I mix the two, it allows it to actually give me the lift that Blonde Me allows, but then it allows it to not swell quite as much because it is a clay lightener. So I like this combo. It makes it so it doesn't lift quite as fast and it kind of protects the hair a little bit, and it kind of makes it so it doesn't get bleeders, which is really nice. So then we're using 7 volume just because I'm not trying to get her hair super blonde. I'm just trying to lift it a little bit and just kind of even things out. So we just mixed up a little bit of lightener because I was only doing a couple foils just to kind of pop things out, so we didn't need much. Then we went in and we applied with her roots first. We were blending this over a little bit over her line of demarcation from where her highlights were. I wanted to make sure that everything was going to be very blended. She really loves her natural color, so we wanted to very much just kind of, work with that and just kind of bring her back to her natural a little bit more. So once we applied her roots, we went through and just like brushed it all out. Then I'm doing my braided balayage method, which I do have another video on that if you're interested in seeing more so how I did this. So I go through and I hand pick all of my highlights and my lowlights before I foil, just so I can this helps to simplify things and helps to kind of, if you're doing a balayage, helps to make the process way quicker. So with her hair, honestly, her color only took about like 20-25 minutes or so. It was super fast, and so honestly it was really nice just to simplify everything. So you can see I'm just separating all of my highlights and my lowlights beforehand and just clipping them out of my way. Since she prefers to be more of a deeper brunette, I did opt to leave the underneath of her hair all dark, simply because we want to feel more like a brunette, so that's the greatest way to do so. So I'm just weaving out my highlights through my very top section, because honestly I am going to be adding in some more color with the extensions. So the goal is with your client's hair is to have to do as least as possible to their hair and mostly have the color built in with the extensions. That way their hair gets more of a break. It can just kind of heal and be happy, not worry about it being super over processed, because especially since we're going to add in keratin bonds with her hair, those are going to add in some really nice highlight pieces that are going to look very natural, versus if we added in some wefts that totally didn't match, it might have a totally different feel. So I went in and just hand balayaged these pieces and just I honestly only did, I think, 6 pieces. I think I had 2 pieces in the front on each side and 1 piece in the back on each side. So it honestly was super quick, which was so nice. I left the teases uncolored just because I wanted to make sure I had a really nice like transition shade in here. But I painted a little bit up more towards her face just to give her a little bit more brightness through there. But honestly, we wanted to fill mostly her natural color. We wanted these pieces to be very soft and subtle. We didn't want anything blonde or anything blonde. We were going to be toning these to more so like a, just kind of a brunette, like a lighter brunette shade than what we're going at with her roots. So once we finished her letter foils, we went in and just painted all those low light pieces outside and just did an all over color on those pieces. Once it finished, we let it process for about 25 to 30 minutes and then she was ready to wash. So I went through, and I always like to do a double wash, especially when I have done like darker colors. Then my assistant Amber went through and milk rinsed everything while I went through and mixed up our gloss and picked out all of my hair colors that I wanted to use. For her gloss, since we already smudged it, I don't need to smudge it again, so I'm just doing an all over gloss. I'm doing shades EQ 5NW, 6NB, and 7NW, just with their normal processing solution. Then I'm going to go through and just do an all over gloss. It doesn't matter that it's getting on her previous dark pieces simply because this is lighter than her dark pieces. So this is just going to target all of our light pieces that we currently have. So then my assistant was kind enough to go through and just clean up all of our dishes while she was processing. I like to let my glosses process from anywhere from like 15 to 20 minutes, just depending on how much, toning out we need. Then she just cleaned up while I went in and edited some content real quick. She's honestly the best at keeping our space nice and super clean. Now she's prepping for our extensions. We are going to be installing everything together, which is honestly such a time saver. So I'm going in and just rinsing her hair out. I'm going to do a nice deep conditioner. Since I already shampooed her twice, you don't necessarily have to shampoo, but I'm going to anyways, just to make sure that her scalp is super clean, simply because you cannot wash your hair for about 3 days or longer after getting the keratin bonds installed. So I feel like the longer people can wait to get them to wash their hair after they get them, the better. So I like to just make sure their hair is freaking so clean. Then I'm just going to be conditioning her ends. I want to make sure that her scalp gets a really nice condition too, because with the keratin bonds, you want to avoid putting like a heavy conditioner right on your scalp. Plus, it's always nice to get that really nice scalp massage when you're getting your hair done. I always like to make sure that my extension girlies get a super nice wash, simply because you can't really wash your hair the same when you have extensions. It's just kind of how it is. So I like to make sure that they get the whole freaking treatment when they come in to get their extensions done. We're now going to prep her hair for the blow dry. I went through and sprayed our leave-in conditioner, our heat protectant. We put some oil and some cream in her hair. Then we are just blow drying. She did have a nasty knot in there just because sometimes the hair bowl just likes to suck everything together. So we're just blow drying her hair all out perfectly straight just so I can see exactly how things lay. So her dimension is very subtle. Her hair was very porous, so it liked to suck up the gloss a lot, which is totally normal, especially since her hair is, it's the texture that it is. So I'm going through and just picking out my extension colors. I had set some aside, but I'm just kind of figuring out exactly how many of each color I'm going to want. But the key with extensions is nobody's hair is 100% the same color, and it's so nice to just mix and match shades, because that's what's going to look the most natural. So I ended up using 4 different shades for this look. I have the brands Bellamy and the brand Scotty & Ashton. So for the Bellamy hair, I am using the Off Black Mocha Cream, and I'm also using their mahogany chocolate color, chocolate mahogany, yes. And then for Scotty & Ashton, I'm using their colors 1B and number 2. So we started off by doing just a row at the nape of her neck. So with her hair is very thin up top. And so since we wanted to go for a length as well as fullness install, we primarily had to just put them kind of throughout the perimeter of her hair and avoid putting things on the crown of her head, simply because her hair was too thin to be able to even cover then. So we had that conversation when she came in a couple weeks ago for her consultation. So she already knew, but this was the only type of extensions that her hair would actually be able to, one, handle, but two, hide. So honestly, that's the number one thing I love with the keratin bond extensions is they allow people who typically would not be able to have extensions, they allow them to be able to actually get extensions and to have really nice hair. So these are honestly the best. Doing a full head of these does take a effing long time, but it's all worth it, as you will see. So we did one row at the nape of her neck, like I said. Then we start off with traditional row placement, like I would with wefts, but we're doing this just boom, 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 just packing in the bonds just right next to each other. That way we don't have any stringiness or any gaps. So I always do my assistant's first bond. That way we're starting our bonds at the exact same points, and then we just kind of move to the back. And then I typically always finish once we get a little too crowded back there. So we staggered our colors based off of placement. So on her very underneath row, I staggered between the colors 1B and 2. Then on her row on the underneath, I went and I used the mahogany, the chocolate mahogany, then number 2, and then 1B. So we just did a pattern of 3. Then on the next row, I incorporated my 1B mocha cream color as well. That's a little bit lighter. So we did the mocha cream, then the chocolate mahogany, 2, then 1. So we had 4 different colors on that row. Then as I got up more, I actually did a row of just 1B and 2 matched again. And then on my final row, I just did a row of solidly 1B. So since her hair is very fine and very thin, if you think about it with the keratin bonds, it's similar to eyelash extensions, where if you don't have a ton of eyelash extensions, there's only so much volume you can get. Because with her hair, I can't be adding on a keratin bond that is significantly heavier in weight than her own strand that I'm putting it on. If I did that, then it would cause a lot of tension, it would pull things out, it would be very uncomfortable, and it overall wouldn't be good for her scalp. So the piece of hair that I'm using, I have to match it to the piece of the hair that I'm putting it on. So each of these bonds is about a half a gram. So I had 135 bonds throughout her whole head. If she had more thickness up top, I actually would have put more bonds up higher, but we put the bonds as high as we could possibly put them with them still being hidden. So you have to keep that in mind. Every install is going to be totally different with who you're doing it on, but that's why it's important for people to come in for a consultation. That way you can kind of get a feel for their hair and you can give them realistic expectations and just pricing quotes and all that stuff. So we used a little less than 3 bags. It was a little bit more than 2.5, but it was not quite 3. So honestly, if her hair was a little thicker up top, I would have put probably 3.5 bonds. And I think that thickness would have been really good, because I feel like I wish it would have been a little bit thicker, but she is so used to having thin hair that even though this was not as thick as I would want it, it was actually the perfect thickness for her. And I explained to her that even in the future, if her hair up top thickens up, we can put things up higher. And she said, no, I actually really love this thickness because it looks realistic for my hair. She's like, people would notice it if I suddenly went from having no hair to having a ton of hair. But she's like, this looks like it could be mine, so that's what I like. So she was very realistic in what she wanted, which honestly helped me a lot as an extension specialist. So once we got all those in, I went through and I surface trimmed her hair. I layered things a bit, gave her some nice face framing, just to make sure that everything was going to blend very well. I always like to take my time during this process, because if you're not blending the hair, you're really gonna be able to tell that it doesn't blend very well. So I always like to make sure that I'm taking that part very seriously. Then we went in and curled her hair because she wanted to see what it would look like fully curled. She doesn't curl it very often, but when in Rome, you gotta get your hair curled. So then I'm just using the Kenra 21 just to set her all nice and good. Then I'm just gonna brush her out. Honestly, it looked so pretty. You would never look at her and just assume that she had extensions. It looks honestly very natural, which is what we wanted. So she'd been waiting forever to get extensions. This was her first time she's ever had permanent extensions. She's been wearing clip-ins for a while. And the nice thing that she said with these, she kept saying it, is she's like, I can't even feel these. I can't even feel these. Like, my whole head is full of them and I can't even feel them. So that's the nice thing with these, is like, they don't feel heavy. They're not, you know, they're not bulky, they're not heavy, they're not hurting your head. I know wefts can kind of give you a tension headache after you get them, but these are not like that, which is honestly the best part. And like I said, they allow people whose hair wouldn't be able to handle normal extensions be able to have the hair that they're really wanting. So just as a recap, this is what we looked like when we started today. Just very thin. Obviously you could kind of see her scalp, and it was not very good. She has ordered something to help her hair grow, so I'm really hoping it helps her. And this is her after. It honestly turned out so pretty. We did do 20-inch extensions. I did take off just probably about an inch or so just to make sure that everything looked very thick on her ends, and we just added in some nice little face framing and some texture just to make sure that it looks like a real hair and not like extensions. So, and then this is kind of what it looks like from the back. It's so pretty. She's never had her hair this long in her whole life, so this was honestly so nice. And you can tell that like those little bits of lighter pieces in the extensions give her just that subtle dimension that she's looking for. So thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. I hope you enjoyed this one.